Installing the ceiling to my Chevrolet Express that I'm converting into a camper was a pretty quick job. It took about 12 hours of labor over 2 days. Required that I cut several pieces out. I needed a bunch of rivets, needed a rivet gun, I needed my drill, I needed a lot of screws. And that was really about it when it came to materials. The wood I used, 1/4 inch thick birch plywood, and I also had an 8 foot by 4 foot textured mahogany type piece that after I had the ceiling on, I was able to put directly up to make it look better. So it wasn't just cut up birch plywood connected, it was actually a full solid textured piece that was much more pleasing visually.
To make the ceiling job easier, and based on the amount of give I'm probably gonna have with the rigid insulation, I'm gonna cut 1/4 inch plywood boards to go over these ribs. What I'm gonna do is rivet those boards to the ribs, and then I will be able to work with the boards instead of the metal. It'll be a lot easier to screw into those boards. Once I rivet the boards in these gaps, I'll then just cut out the panels and screw them directly onto those boards.
What I did, since I was working with an already insulated ceiling that I had done, was make sure that the rigid foam insulation was flush with my ribs that are on the ceiling of the camper van. There are 3 ribs, and the inch-thick rigid foam insulation that was in between each of these ribs did not sit exactly even with the ribs themselves.
I have all of my pieces of wood cut out now that I'm going to use for my ceiling, and what I've gone ahead and done is with these boards that I'm going to be riveting to the ribs, I've just drilled crisscross holes so that I'll have plenty of rivets in that metal, so it's held up pretty strongly, because what I'm going to be doing is drilling the boards that are going to go lengthwise into this wood, and it's important that I have these pieces of wood in there really strongly.
If I tried to attach the panels that I used for my ceiling directly to those ribs, it wouldn't have been possible because the rigid foam insulation came too far out. The screws just wouldn't have made it there. So I cut these panels, put them directly on the ribs, and then I put 14 rivets in each of the panels so that the panels were very securely on those ribs. There were 3 ribs, I did it for all 3, and once I had those birch panels directly on the ribs, they sat very flush with the birch plywood.
I've got all the boards in place along the ribs. Now I am just gonna drill in through these holes to make my pilot holes for my rivets. And once I got the holes in the ribs, I'm just gonna rivet those boards right on. I've gotten the wooden planks riveted onto the ribs of the roof now. So what I'm gonna do is get my roof panels, and I'm just gonna screw them onto these wooden planks, and then probably rivet them on the edges to this double thick layer of sheet metal. That should be pretty sturdy and will be a good foundation for me to put the pattern on that'll look better than the regular plywood.
When those panels were in, those panels that went over the ribs were in, I cut 3 pieces of birch plywood that when combined fit over the entire ceiling. When I had each of these 3 pieces cut out, I held them up, I held one at a time up, and screwed it into that birch panel that I had on the rib. and once it was able to hold its own weight so I didn't have to hold it up anymore, what I did was rivet the panels directly to this double layer thick sheet metal around the lip of the inside ceiling.
I've got the wood all put on the ceiling now. Not exactly perfect. I don't think it's going to be much of an issue because I'm going to layer something on top. See if I can't smooth it out just in those two places where they're not exactly flush. Other than that, it looks pretty good. I think I'm going to end up riveting and screwing the board that I'm going to put here onto the wood that I've already got stuck on the ceiling pretty well here.
The 3 pieces probably took about 6 hours to put up. I riveted all around the edge and I screwed probably 8 screws into each of my panels that I had put over the rib to connect to these larger panels that covered the entire ceiling. Once I had the entire ceiling covered with my 3 larger birch panels that were riveted up and screwed onto the ribs, I took my textured piece, a 4-foot by 8-foot piece, and connected it directly to that 3-piece mosaic ceiling that I had up.
Got my ceiling here up. This was just one long 8-foot by 4-foot board. Just a little textured pattern that I put over my my cutout 3 pieces that I used as a foundation for the ceiling.
When I had that entire ceiling piece done, I went up on the roof and using the ceiling fan I was going to put in, I took a marker and just traced around that square.
So I'm up on top of the van and I've got the piece that's going to go on the roof right here. What I plan on doing is just drawing the outline here, and then from the outline I'm just gonna cut. So what I'm gonna do is drill into the corners, then put my saw in and just cut along. And the plastic's a little pliable, so I'm hoping that I will be able to not have to do too many modifications after I cut it in, and it'll just fit snugly in, and that'll be that. I essentially just looked at where the center would go, and this fits over where I want it, so the solar panel is going to go over here, right over here. This seems to make as much sense as any other method. I didn't really even measure, I just know these are the center. This looks pretty centered. It's not extremely important that it's right in the center. I just gotta cut along so that it falls into place.
And made sure I did it in a place that was going to go through all of the ceiling pieces that I had. The rigid foam insulation, the 1/4-inch thick birch plywood, and the texture piece that I had on top of that. I took my drill and I drilled a hole in the 4 corners and made sure that it connected all the way down through the ceiling. And once that happened, I then took my jigsaw and I just cut the square out.
It looks like my drill bit just made it through all the way. I've got all 4 holes through here, and I'm gonna get up on the roof and cut in with my skill saw.
Once the square was cut out, I just had an empty square and was able to install that fan directly onto the roof.
Okay, hole in ceiling accomplished. Now I will just install the fan. Pretty self-explanatory. The pieces all fit together. This didn't come with it. This is called Sikaflex. Sikaflex is an elastic adhesive. I'm going to put it around the outside so that I'm going to get a water seal because the roof isn't entirely even up there. I've got the ceiling fan fully installed now. Was pretty easy to do. I just put a layer of Sikaflex around the edges, screwed it in. There were 3 different pieces that had to fit together. I had to trim this bottom part so it fits snugly with the fan and the and this guy that fits here on the roof. But all in all, not the hardest job. Happy to have this one out of the way. And now I've just got to set it up once I've got my solar panel and electricity set up.
All in all, probably took, like I said, 10 to 12 hours to do. Probably a 2-day job, 1.5-day job. Hopefully this has been helpful, and please subscribe if you are planning on doing something like this yourself and want to see any more videos on how to continue converting a Chevrolet Express into a camper van. Thank you very much. Have a great day.